So everything here is threaded on one principle, and that is stated in the 32nd verse here. Tasmat kena api upayana mana Krishne niveshayet. Somehow or other, one has to think about Krishna or bring one's mind to the lotus feet of Krishna. The same principle is stated by Srila Rupa Goswami, slightly different way. Yena kena prakarena mana Krishne niveshayet. Somehow or other, bring your mind to thinking about Lord Krishna. Then your life will be successful. And that idea of bringing our absorption to Lord Krishna had been very beautifully rendered by Narad Muni here in relation to establishing the position of Lord Krishna as completely impartial, and at the same time Lord Krishna being favorably disposed towards his devotees. So what is the principle? The principle is that you can actually bring your remembrance of Krishna by thinking about him in 5 different ways. Okay? And the 5 ways that are stated as follows. One can bring one's absorption through lusty desires. One can be in fear and still be full of remembrance of Krishna or full of absorption of Krishna. One can even be envious and yet be absorbed in Krishna. Or on account of familial relationship, one can develop that affinity for Krishna. Or one can have great affection for Krishna, and as a result of which one can be totally absorbed in Krishna. So many persons have attained liberation simply by thinking of Krishna with great attention and giving up sinful activities. This great attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection, or devotional service. I shall now explain how one receives Krishna's mercy simply by concentrating one's mind upon him. And Narad Muni is so thorough that he gives 5 examples to make sure that we understand how that can be done. So the examples that Narad Muni gives are as follows. My dear King Yudhishthir, the gopis by their lusty desires, Kamsa by his fear, Shishupal and other kings by envy, the Yadus by their familial relationship with Krishna, and you Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna. And the 6th one actually is putting himself, we the general devotees. Again, Narad Muni taking a very humble position, and we will understand why he puts in this way very shortly. We, the general devotees, by our devotional service, have obtained the mercy of Krishna. So in this way, actually, there are not 5 but 6, right? So lusty desires, fear, envy, familial relationship, great affection, and devotional service. So in this way, there are 6 ways. All right. Prabhupada writes in the purport number 30, explaining the transformative power of thinking of Krishna by quoting 10:33-39. If a bona fide listener hears of Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, which seem to be lusty affairs, the lusty desires in his heart, which constitute the heart disease of the conditioned soul, will be vanquished, and he will become a most exalted devotee of the Lord. If one who hears of the gopis' lusty behavior with Krishna becomes free from lusty desires, certainly the gopis who approached Krishna became free from all such desires. Similarly, Shishupal and others who were very much envious of Krishna and who constantly thought of Krishna became free from envy. Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda were fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness because of affection. When the mind is somehow or other fully absorbed in Krishna, the material part is very soon vanquished, and the spiritual part, which is attraction to Krishna, becomes manifest. This indirectly confirms that if one thinks of Krishna enviously, simply because of thinking of Krishna, he becomes free from all sinful reactions and thus becomes a pure devotee. And the examples are given in the following verse. So Prabhupada writes in the 31st purport. So here again, the key question is that why should Krishna's friends and devotees have the same position? And Prabhupada continues in that purport, Krishna's devotees attain the association of the Lord as his constant companions either in Vrindavan or in the Vaikuntha planets. Similarly, although Narad Muni wanders in the three worlds, he has exalted devotion for Narayana, Aishwaryaman. The Vrishnis and Yadus and the father and mother of Krishna in Vrindavan all have familial relationships with Krishna. Krishna's foster father and mother in Vrindavan, however, are more exalted than Vasudev and Devaki. And then Prabhupada establishes that the Vraja Gopis are the most beloved of the Lord's devotees. And he distinguishes between the the lust that is expressed by the gopis and the lust of the world in this way. Although the gopis at Vrindavan express their lusty desires in relationship with a paramour or parakya ras, they actually had no lusty desires. This is significant of spiritual advancement. Their desires appeared lusty, but actually they were not the lusty desires of the material world. The Chaitanya Charitamrita compares the desires of the spiritual and material world to gold and iron. Both gold and iron are metal, but there is a vast difference in their value. The lusty desires of the gopis for Krishna are compared to gold, and material lusty desires are compared to iron. So Srila Jiva Goswami has a lot to say for this very, very important verse, where all these six categories of devotees who were absorbed in Krishna in varieties of ways are further described. So first of all, Srila Jiva Goswami quotes this particular verse 7.1.31 in his Krishna Sandarbha to show Krishna's extraordinary power, which points to his being the supreme even among the personalities of Godhead. So Jiva Goswami explains like this: they all attain liberation by the great power of Krishna. So regardless of the emotion, we saw the spectrum here. Somebody is out of fear, somebody is out of envy, somebody out of lusty desires, and then there is affection, there is devotional service, right? And familial relationship, which is kind of in one sense merged in verse number 30, and that's why it's 5 or 6 categories depending on how you see it. But regardless, there is a whole spectrum that is presented, and they all attain liberation by the great power of Krishna, since he is able to attract the mind of any person who thinks of him. And what is the difference here? The difference is that the other forms of the Lord do not have this nature, and they thus do not liberate the demons they kill. And because the Venas, if you remember, Yudhishthir Maharaj asks this question, that what is the key distinction between this King Vena who went to hell versus Shishupal who got Sayujya Mukti. What is the difference? And the difference is that Vena, although hostile to Vishnu, did not attain liberation since he was not absorbed in the Lord. And therefore, in the 32nd verse, it is justified that Tasmat Kena Pyupayana Mana Krishne Niveshayat. By some means, one should concentrate the mind on Krishna. The key point is that the reference is made to Krishna, not Vishnu. That is the focus of Jiva Goswami. And therefore, he says that thus it is proven that among all the forms of the Lord, Krishna has the most amazing power. In other words, we have to pay attention whether in the verses, whether Krishna is mentioned or Vishnu is mentioned. Only Krishna can do this, that even when somebody is approaching in an inimical way, with an envious way, he still awards them purification of the heart, provided that absorption is there. And that is why Jiva Goswami says that thus it is proven that among all the forms of the Lord, Krishna has the most amazing power. And thus his position is Swayam Bhagavan. And that is being made even stronger through this particular verse. Now Jiva Goswami doesn't stop there. He then goes on to explain what is this karma of the gopis, or this lusty desire that is being pointed out. How do we understand this? So Srila Jiva Goswami covers this in Bhakti Sandarbha. So that was Krishna Sandarbha. This is Bhakti Sandarbha. That the gopis have no fault because their calm. So calm is generally used as lust, right? Like in Bhagavad Gita verse, Kamesha Krodhesha Rajoguna Samudbhava. But here there is a big distinction. Although the same word is used, but it has got complete different connotation. The gopis have no fault because their calm, in essence, is filled with preeti or affection. Actually, the gopis' karma is nothing but prema. How do we understand that? He quotes 10:31:19. This is the verse to quote whenever you want to establish the position of the gopis. 10:31:19. So this is the thought process of the gopis. Dearly beloved, your lotus feet are so soft that we place them gently on our breasts, fearing that your feet will be hurt. Our life rests only in you. Our minds therefore are filled with anxiety that your tender feet might be wounded by pebbles as you roam about on the forest path. So what's going on? The gopis actually have no desire for their own happiness, but think only of what will make Krishna happy. This is the key distinction between lust and love. In material relationship, the husband and wife or a boy and girl, they come together with the idea of gratifying their own senses. So they are simply exploiting the other person for the sake of their own happiness. In the case of gopis, just the expression is all filled with love for Krishna. How can Krishna be happy? That is in the forefront of their consciousness, and therefore the so-called lust for the gopis that is used here is actually the highest position of prema. And Jiva Goswami doesn't only quote this verse, he quotes 7 other verses from Srimad Bhagavatam to establish how gopis' love is perfect, sinless, and beyond the realm of matter. Okay. Then Jiva Goswami explains that the gopis that are mentioned here are specific gopis who had been performing sadhana. In other words, these are Nitya Siddha gopis. I'm sorry, these are not the Nitya Siddha gopis, but they are the Sadhana Siddha gopis. Even the gopis are categorized in 2 ways. So Jiva Goswami is pointing out the gopis that are referred to here, they are not the Nitya Siddha gopis, but Sadhana Siddha gopis. And he explains that that Vayam that is used is referring to Narad Muni, who is speaking the text, but Narad Muni is actually thinking back to the previous practices by which he had attained his spiritual body. And we have learned about the life of Narad Muni in the first canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where how Narad Muni went through the spiritual practice under the direction of the Bhakti Vedantis, who were served by Narad Muni and his mother, right? So when Narad Muni is talking about how he attained perfection through this Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, he is referring to his previous life. So Narada achieved the goal by bhakti. This means Vaidhi bhakti. And Vaidhi is included in the list to point out that the path of Bhava Bhakti can be attained by following the Shastric rules. And this is Jiva Goswami's assertion. And therefore Jiva Goswami writes that actually following the rules and regulations of bhakti, like we do hearing and chanting, right? Following the four regulative principles. These are elements of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, or bhakti that is performed under rules and regulations. And Jiva Goswami's point is that just by following Vaidhi bhakti, one can actually reach Rag Marg, or the path of spontaneous devotional service. So he says that Raga Nuga Bhakti means, like technically that means following the path of great devotees who have Raga in their heart. And Raga means taste. But those in whom that taste has not developed should execute Raganuga with a mixture of Vaidhi Bhakti, following the rules and regulations. Also, those who have developed taste but have some position in society should execute Raganuga mixed with Vaidhi Bhakti in order to set an example for the public. This is similar to the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. In this mixture, Vaidhi Bhakti should be suitably performed so that it becomes one with Raganuga. So this is the beautiful way Jiva Goswami helps us understand how this whole spectrum of devotees that are pointed out, they are all getting special mercy of Krishna because of Krishna's special position, even among the personalities of Godhead, even among those who are Vishnu Tattvas. Krishna's position is as the Swayam Bhagavan is made stronger through this particular verse. And therefore, the main conclusion is that somehow or other, one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously. That's what is pointed out in 32nd verse. Then, by one of the 5 different processes mentioned above, so again 5 different because we are merging the affection and familial relationship together. That's why it's 5 different processes mentioned above. One can return home back to Godhead. That's what is mentioned in verse number 32. And this is also the reason why our proposed technique of chant format that I generally show how you can actually meditate on the form of the Supreme Lord while chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra can be effective. It's based on this principle that somehow or other one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously, and then in this way, by absorption, somehow or other bring your absorption in Krishna. And Shukadev Goswami therefore continues that atheists like King Vena, however, being unable to think of Krishna's form in any of these 5 ways, cannot attain salvation. And this is the response to Parikshit Maharaja's questions. So Vena's qualifications superficially matched Shishupal's, because both of them appeared to be atheistic and envious of Krishna. Of course, the key distinctions are the Vena was more towards Vishnu, directed towards Vishnu, not Krishna. In the case of Shishupal, it was directed towards Krishna. And furthermore, Shishupal's absorption was much, much deeper than Vena. Just like we talked about the favorable criticism and unfavorable criticism. The unfavorable criticism had 2 parts to it. Either it is continuous or not continuous. In the case of Shishupal, it was continuous unfavorable criticism, and because of which his absorption was deeper. So his absorption was deeper and it was directed towards Krishna and not Vishnu. And because Vena's envy wasn't focused on Krishna's form, or rather than benefiting from his animosity, Vena's envy carried him to hell. And this is Jiva Goswami's conclusion. So Jiva Goswami therefore firmly answers this question that if one can attain the Lord through hatred, why did Vena go to hell? Okay, and the answer is that although he was envious, he was not filled with thoughts of Krishna. Okay, so as I said, this particular section has just a lot. Okay, so that's why you have to go through this stage by stage. Okay, Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan um, poses a question and then answers the same question. He says that as Krishna can do anything he desires, can he also make, this is a very interesting question, can he also not make the unqualified qualified? Because anything is possible for the Lord, but although he could do this, he does not have that desire, since there is no good reason for him to do so. And Srimad Bhagavatam, this 32nd verse, it says that one must somehow think of Krishna, whether in a friendly way or inimically. And Narada concludes with a clear directive: think of Krishna. Although thinking of Krishna, regardless of one's mentality, purifies one's consciousness, Narada's actual conclusion is to think of Krishna favorably, ultimately with great love. And Prabhupada distinguishes between the Mayavadi atheists, or those who possess these mentalities in different, in the way they are actually getting different kinds of results. So Prabhupada writes in the 32nd purport, the only business of the Mayavadi atheists is to make Krishna formless, and consequently, because of this severe offense at the lotus feet of Krishna, they cannot expect salvation. Okay. The second kind of person that he describes is the one that thinks of himself as Krishna's enemy. So how is that person thinking? Here is Krishna, my enemy. I have to kill him. They think of Krishna in his actual form, and thus they attain salvation. So you can imagine the two categories is, one is a mention of the Mayavadis, right? There's the first category who conceive of Krishna as formless. They actually gain nothing. The second category is mentioned, those who are inimical, that always thinking Krishna is my enemy, I have to kill him. So because they think of Krishna in his actual form, and thus they attain salvation. Compared to Mayavadis, these guys are put in a better position. That's the interesting part. And the third kind of the person are those who are devotees, who constantly think of Krishna's form and are certainly liberated. And they are placed in the category of the liberated position, receiving the highest result in the most natural way. And therefore, Prabhupada ends his purport by saying that one must always think of Krishna whether as a friend or as an enemy. So while doing that, like, he is basically bringing devotees who is acting as friend, is bringing those who are demons, who are treating Krishna as their enemy, and the highest position is of course of those in the position of devotees, but these demoniac people are also better than Mayavadis. That's what Prabhupada is pointing out here. And Bhakti Sandarbha again in Jiva Goswami writes there by citing the Bhagavatam 11th canto 2nd chapter 34th verse, that even ignorant living entities can very easily come to know the Supreme Lord if they adopt those means prescribed by the Supreme Lord himself. The process recommended by the Lord is to be known as the Bhagavad Dharma, or devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I hope you develop sufficient clarity after going through this section. This has, as I said, was very, very packed section, lot to meditate on. But the key point is that somehow or other, bring your absorption at the lotus feet of Krishna, your life will be successful.